In the vast and endless dunes of the desert, where the scorching sun tinged everything in shades of orange, gold, and brightness, lived the renowned Sheikh Sayyid Hussein in his splendid and imposing palace, a magnificent fortress that seemed to naturally emerge from the infinite sands surrounding it. Hussein was a figure of authority, an imposing man who stood out not only for his immeasurable wealth and power but also for the aura of isolation that seemed to surround him, even amidst the excessive luxury in which he lived. From a very young age, driven by an inner restlessness, he traveled to distant lands in search of knowledge, where he discovered an unexpected passion for European classical music, something that deeply contrasted with his cultural roots, deeply anchored in the heart of the desert. One hot and sultry night, when the desert sky was filled with twinkling stars that looked like jewels in the vast firmament, an unexpected story began to unfold. Convinced he was doing good, acting out of a noble motive, Hussein made the audacious decision to intervene in the marriage of Samia, a young woman of striking beauty whose heart, however, did not beat with love for her fiancé Malik. He believed with almost naive confidence that by abducting her, he could win her affection and give her true love, as he was completely and irreversibly in love with her. However, the sheikh's plan, though well-intentioned at heart, was doomed to cause more pain than relief. Forcing love, no matter how pure the motivations, rarely yields the desired results. Like many of us, Hussein sometimes acted blindly, driven by his intense feelings, without considering the potential disastrous consequences of his actions. As he wandered through the vast and cold corridors of his enormous palace, immersed in tormented and anguished thoughts, Hussein felt the crushing weight of his own decisions. He deeply desired to do what was right, but he gradually realized that his choices were putting not only his fate at risk but also Samia's, whose life and future were now inescapably tied to his. Hussein had fallen hopelessly in love with Samia, the enchanting young woman he had watched with fascination as she walked through the city and the lush gardens filled with colorful flowers. It was instant, overwhelming love, as if destiny, in its mysterious wisdom, had traced a special path for their fates to cross in that dazzling sunlit city in the heart of the desert. Hussein, a man known for his calm demeanor and gentle gestures, and for his penetrating eyes that reflected his intense soul, could not help but notice the natural grace with which Samia moved through the narrow streets and the always lively and noisy markets. Each of her movements, no matter how simple, deeply captivated him, and he found himself completely enchanted by her. His thoughts, now dominated by Samia's figure, often returned to the image of her serenely strolling through the garden, where roses bloomed in vibrant shades of red, pink, and white. It was as if each delicate petal whispered a secret only he could understand, as if the universe were conspiring to bring them closer and closer together. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, in a modest and cozy house decorated with bouquets of fresh and fragrant flowers, Samia was preparing, seemingly with tranquility, for what was supposed to be the most important and happiest day of her life. The soft and golden morning sunlight gently filtered through the thin curtains, illuminating the small room with a warm and cozy glow. Samia was dressed in a beautiful and delicate white gown, whose intricate embroidery shimmered charmingly in the soft light of the rising sun, like twinkling stars in the night sky. Her precious jewelry, a legacy inherited from her dear grandmother, gleamed intensely, reflecting not only her family's wealth but also the hope and happiness she longed to find in her imminent marriage to Malik, an honorable, respectable, and financially successful man. Her parents, their faces brimming with pride and joy, moved around her, attentive to every small detail, carefully adjusting every aspect of her appearance with loving zeal. Every detail of the dress, every strand of hair carefully styled, testified to the affection and high expectations they had for this very special day. However, despite the celebration and the palpable joy of her parents for the union that was about to take place, Samia's heart did not beat with the same intensity. As she carefully observed her reflection in the mirror, she internally wrestled with a growing sense of unease and anxiety that seemed to overwhelm her more with each passing minute. On the morning before the long-awaited wedding, while the sun tinged the desert horizon with beautiful shades of pink and lilac, Hussein's grand palace was filled with hushed whispers and rumors running through the corridors. The scorching heat of the sun was beginning to be felt on the distant and vast dunes, while inside the tall and sturdy stone walls of the palace, the servants and guards moved with haste and restlessness. Some whispered discreetly in small groups, exchanging nervous glances, full of speculation about the unexpected and audacious decision the sheik seemed to have made. If you're enjoying this story so far, make sure you're subscribed to our channel because the next ones will be even more thrilling, and you don't want to miss them. Now let's continue. Hussein, known for his unwavering willpower and unpredictable nature, had indeed surprised everyone with his bold choice to intervene in Samia's destiny, the young woman whose wedding was scheduled to take place the following day. Meanwhile, in Samia's modest and cozy home, an atmosphere laden with anticipation, mixed with a hint of nervousness, hung heavily in the air. The adobe walls, decorated with colorful tapestries and vases full of fragrant flowers, bore witness to the constant and frantic agitation of the last preparations for the grand wedding. The women of the family and Samia's close friends hurried back and forth, adjusting the final details of the elegant wedding dress, carefully polishing the precious jewelry, and ensuring that every small detail of the event was absolutely flawless for the much-anticipated day. Yet, despite the intense bustle and the evident euphoria of everyone around her, a deep, intense silence reigned in Samia's heart. While she was surrounded by the meticulous and zealous care of the women who loved her, Samia felt the crushing weight of a decision that, deep down, did not completely belong to her. Her gaze wandered, lost through the open windows, which opened up to the vast and unexplored blue sky of the desert, as she silently questioned, with a heavy heart, what fate had in store for her beyond the safe and familiar walls that had protected her since childhood. As the sun reached its highest point over the distant dunes, a sudden change in the atmosphere interrupted the frenetic activity in Samia's house. The hot desert wind seemed to whisper a warning, as the sound of firm footsteps approached. The imposing guards from Hussein's palace appeared at the door, their white tunics contrasting with the scorching heat of the sun, and the golden glow reflecting off the adobe walls of the house. Hussein, with the majestic presence of a lion ready to attack its prey, entered the main room as if the very air had changed with his arrival. His gaze was serious, a mixture of determination and power, and his voice echoed with an authority that cut through the air full of uncertainties and tension. "Samia, come with me," he declared, his voice reverberating off the ornate walls of the house, laden with a cold seriousness. The tense silence that quickly settled in stifled the sound of the frenetic activities around. The women, until then focused on the preparations for Samia's wedding, froze where they stood. Some still held the wedding dress, their needles motionless in the white fabric, while others exchanged confused glances, their faces stamped with shock and disbelief. Samia's heart raced uncontrollably, as if it were about to explode from surprise, fear, and indignation. Her wide eyes, stunned by Hussein's disconcerting revelation, sought a logical explanation for what was happening, but the chaos around her offered only more confusion. "What does this mean? I'm about to get married," she exclaimed, her voice echoing through the room with a tone of disbelief and despair. She struggled desperately to comprehend the unexpected turn of events, as the morning sun, with its golden rays, cast elongated shadows through the open windows, bathing the environment in a surreal light that made everything even more confusing. Every fiber of her being screamed at the injustice of the situation, but Hussein's overwhelming power and presence silenced her words before they were even spoken. Hussein, imposing and resolute like a monarch on his throne, did not waver in the face of Samia's resistance. He stated with conviction that he had spoken with her parents and that they were in agreement. His voice, firm and relentless, allowed no room for doubt, and with an imposing and almost mechanical gesture, his guards silently advanced, surrounding Samia with a precision that indicated this had already been planned. Overwhelmed by a whirlwind of emotions ranging from panic to disbelief, she realized, with growing horror, that her parents, whose faces she could not distinguish in the agitated crowd, had apparently consented to this drastic action, making everything even more unbearable. "Your parents accepted my proposal. Now you are my bride," reaffirmed Hussein, his voice reverberating with a false certainty that cut through the air like a sharp blade. The words echoed in Samia's mind like a death knell, marking the end of her freedom and the beginning of a forced new life. She felt the ground disappear beneath her feet, as if she were suddenly plunged into a nightmare from which she could not awaken. Each word he spoke was like a blow, a cruel confirmation that her life would never be the same. Struggling against disbelief and rising fear, Samia fought with all her strength against the guards who held her firmly. Every muscle in her body was tense with resistance, as if her spirit was desperately battling against the invisible chains of fate that Hussein had brutally forged for her. The home of her family, which had always been her safe haven, now seemed distant, like a fleeting, unreachable memory. As she was escorted away from the safety of her old life, Samia cast one last desperate glance around her, trying to catch a glimpse of her parents among the bewildered crowd. However, her gaze found only unfamiliar, confused faces, silent witnesses to an event that seemed more like a tragic theatrical performance than the harsh reality she was living. What Samia did not know at that moment was that Hussein had already fallen in love with her long before he saw her among the flowers in the garden. He had watched her from afar like a silent predator and felt an instant love for her, even without ever truly knowing her. Although he knew that Samia was the daughter of a humble merchant and destined to marry Malik, a respectable man, but without the burning passion that Hussein felt, he could not accept this fate. Driven by a growing and silent obsession, Hussein acted impulsively. He kidnapped her, taking her to his palace with the desperate hope that by living with him, Samia would eventually love him in the same way he already loved her, even though his methods were condemnable. In the following days, the palace echoed with the presence of a reluctant bride. Samia resisted with all her might the new life that had been imposed upon her, her heart overflowing with anger and resentment toward the man who had torn her from her family, her fiancé, and her freedom. Every corner of the palace, no matter how luxurious, reminded her of the prison in which she now lived. But Hussein, determined and patient like a calculating strategist, did not give up easily. With an unexpected kindness that contrasted with his powerful and feared image, he tried to win Samia's heart by presenting her with a world of luxury and comfort she had never imagined, but which, to her, held no value in the face of her lost autonomy. However, Samia, indignant at the way she had been taken from her home, treated Hussein with coldness and contempt. During meals and events in the palace, she was forced to remain by his side, like a trophy of an unjust conquest. Whenever Hussein expressed his love, saying, "Light of my eyes, your presence brightens my day, my love," Samia would turn her face away in disdain, rejecting his words with a silence that spoke louder than any response. With almost infinite patience, he waited for the day when she could see, beyond his reckless act, the genuine love he felt for her. But all Samia could feel was contempt for the loss of her freedom, and a deep hatred for the man who had forced her into a life she had not chosen. A month passed and Hussein, now exhausted and disillusioned, had not managed to win Samia's heart. He who once seemed unshakable, now faced his last desperate attempt, the sweet and poetic beauty of the moonlight in the desert. He believed that this magical light, with its silvery softness, could melt Samia's hardened heart and show her the true depth of his feelings. So on a night of rare beauty, with the full moon illuminating the dunes with its silver glow, Hussein invited Samia to join him on the terrace to appreciate the serenity of the night, while Chopin's prelude in E minor softly echoed through the palace, as if each note were a silent confession of his love. He did not say a word. He had already expressed everything through the music. When Samia stepped onto the terrace, She allowed the moon and the music to penetrate her soul as never before. For the first time, she saw Hussein's loving gaze not as that of an oppressor, but as someone who truly loved her with an intensity she could not fully understand. He had recognized that kidnapping her had been a grave mistake, and he was determined to correct his path. The next day he would let her return home, but before that, he wanted to share this special moment with her, a moment that would be engraved in her memories as undeniable proof of the sincere love he felt for her. As the prelude to the moonlight continued to play, silent tears streamed from the right eye of the powerful sheik. He had never loved anyone like this, with a mixture of passion, regret, and hope. Despite recognizing the significance of the moment, Samia remained silent, absorbing every word and gesture of Hussein. The atmosphere was magical. The starry sky, the full moon, and the music enveloped them in a celestial embrace, as if the universe were conspiring for this moment. When the music finally came to an end, Hussein spoke in a trembling voice, his eyes full of restrained emotions, as if each word were a final attempt to reach Samia's heart. "Samia, I've done everything to show you the sincere love I carry in my heart. I stopped your marriage to a man you didn't truly love. I brought you to my palace, where I tried to offer you the best of me, but never at any moment did I force you into anything. I waited, hoping that you might love me as I love you, but I realized that nothing I've done has worked," Hussein said, his voice breaking. The pain of knowing that he might be about to lose her tightened his chest, choking his words. "You are not my prisoner, Samia. You are free to return home whenever you wish," he concluded, revealing the agony he felt at the possibility of seeing her leave forever. Upon hearing these words, Samia stood up, feeling a different warmth fill her chest. A timid smile began to form on her lips, a reflection of the relief she felt. "Thank you so much, sir," she murmured, with a sincerity that until then she had kept only to herself. Tears began to fill her eyes, mixing with the confused feelings that had grown within her throughout their time of forced coexistence. She knew that, despite everything, she could not deny the attraction and love that had silently formed in her heart. The next morning, with a radiant smile and a light heart, Samia returned to her parents' home. Their joy at seeing her was immediate, especially upon learning that Hussein, despite everything, had not touched her. She was still free to marry Malik as originally planned. Her parents, relieved, celebrated their daughter's safe return, and the prospect of seeing her follow the path they believed was best for her. Malik, though visibly hurt by the situation, understood what had happened. He knew that true love could not be forced, and he accepted it with a serenity that only time could heal. However, while Hussein had not touched Samia's body, he had deeply touched her heart. In the silence of the night and in the days that followed, Samia could not stop thinking about the last night she had spent in the palace, the full moon illuminating the sky, Chopin's moonlit prelude echoing like a sweet memory, and the image of Hussein with a solitary tear in his eyes. That scene replayed in her mind incessantly, bringing with it conflicting feelings. Her wedding to Malik was scheduled for 2 days later, and while everyone around her was content with the return to normalcy, Samia felt deeply sad. She had fought bravely to resist the feelings Hussein had stirred within her. From the moment she was taken to his palace, Samia tried to maintain an emotional barrier between them, an icy wall meant to protect her. But Hussein's kindness, his sincere passion, and the care he showed had slowly begun to melt that barrier. That night, under the bright stars that dotted the sky like promises, Samia realized that she could no longer deny the truth growing in her heart. She mentally replayed every gesture from Hussein, every word he had spoken to her, every attempt to win her over, not by force, but through a vulnerability that deeply touched her soul. Sitting by her bedroom window, looking out at the vast desert stretching beyond the walls of the house, Samia felt torn between duty and desire. The desert wind whispered in her ears, as if calling her to make a decision. Her heart beat erratically, echoing the unspoken words she so wished to express to Hussein. Now I want you, my sweet sheik, you have won my heart. But what should I do? She whispered to herself, unable to ignore the love growing stronger within her, while the reality of her commitment to Malik pulled her back to the present. The harsh reality of her commitment to Malik tormented her day and night. She knew that her wedding was scheduled, that her family and the community eagerly awaited the event. How could she undo the ties that had already been woven? What would happen if she decided to follow her heart and abandon the path that had been laid out for her? Every decision felt as heavy as a mountain on her shoulders, and time marched on relentlessly, forcing her to face the choice that would shape not only her future, but also the future of everyone around her. On the morning of the wedding day, as the sun timidly rose over the distant minarets of the city, Samia felt the weight of indecision hit her heart with an irresistible force. The golden light of dawn seemed to illuminate the paths she could take, but only one truly called to her. With a racing heart, she made a decision that surprised her to the core. She silently fled her parents' house, leaving behind the meticulous preparations for her wedding to Malik, a respectable man, but not the one who owned her heart. Her quick and determined steps led her through the narrow streets of the city to Hussein's palace, where her heart had belonged since the moment she recognized the depth of her feelings. When Hussein saw her approaching the palace, his heart raced, a mixture of worry and hope. He ran to her, his eyes reflecting the same emotion he had felt since the first moment he saw her. "What happened, Samia? Why have you come back? Did you forget something important?" he asked, looking deeply into her eyes, his heart overflowing with emotion and expectation. Samia, with a soft and emotional voice, responded, "Yes, my sheik, I left behind a pure and intense love, something that was lost in the moment we heard Chopin. But is there still hope for us?" Hussein, overcome with indescribable joy, smiled with an intensity that lit up his tired face. Without hesitation, he pulled her closer and kissed her softly, murmuring in her ear, "There is always time for true love. Marry me, my great love." That kiss sealed a love that had overcome obstacles and challenges, a love born of unusual circumstances, but proven to be stronger than any adversity. Samia's parents, though reluctant at first, accepted their daughter's decision when they saw the happiness shining brightly in her eyes. They recognized that the love between Samia and Hussein was authentic and resilient, and allowed them to follow their path together. Thus, Samia and Hussein lived happily ever after in the desert palace, surrounded by the untouched beauty of the dunes and cradled by the eternal melody of Chopin's Prelude in E minor, which now echoed as the anthem of their love. What began as a mistake, with an uncertain destiny, transformed into an epic love story that would inspire future generations to believe that true love can arise in the most unlikely moments, and that it can transcend all barriers. I hope you enjoyed this fascinating story, so subscribe to our channel and take the opportunity to watch the video now appearing on your screen. See you next time.